Let's go. Hello and welcome to the latest MSC Performance Podcast. Today I am delighted to be joined by none other than Mr. Max Hartman. How are we doing, buddy?
Back here again. Yeah, all good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. Yeah, buzzing, mate. A couple of weeks to go. Weather's warming up a little bit. Sun's been poking out, saying hello.
Yeah. I got my shorts on for the first time today.
Really?
Shorts are out. Shorts will be out now for October.
Wow. I mean, it's raining and it's 8 degrees, mate. But I appreciate the keenness.
Optimism, mate. It's
optimism. Exactly. But God, yesterday was lovely. That was the first day I had the shorts on, and it felt good, mate. I've been making some calf gains in the off season. So we're ready. We're ready. How you feeling, mate, about the sort of return? Obviously, 2 weeks away now.
Buzzing, absolutely buzzing. Like, obviously, as you know, like I'm lucky that I can do a little bit of work as it is kind of being on the injury management side of things, having some people in clinic. So for me, it's been, some level of routines there, but it's just not the same, is it? Like I say, when when everyone's back in and when the gym's buzzing and when the gym's busy, it's awesome, isn't it? It's great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone again. It's
going to be great, mate. Yeah, it feels like, for me, it feels like kind of opening for the first time again. Mm-hmm. It's been so long now, or it feels like it's been so long. I've lost track of the months really, but what's it been? Three months. So I mean, the same amount of time as last summer, isn't it? But yeah. It does kind of feel like opening for the first time again, and I suppose well, let's not tempt fate, but hopefully this is the last one. It does feel like a reopening.
Touch wood.
Yeah.
I think it's obviously I don't want to. There's obviously some spoilers already out on social media, but obviously with a couple of new toys knocking around in the gym as well, I think it's going to feel like a new gym. It's going to feel like a completely different offering. It's going to feel like a MSC Mark II, so to speak. Like there's been some big step ups. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, it's been some good upgrades with the kit, hasn't there? And I think obviously we're looking to move things around a little bit and sort of change the layout of the gym. So all will be ready for that first day back, I think. So
yeah,
happy days, exciting times.
It's going to be good.
So to move on to the sort of subject of today's podcast, the title is Injury Management on Return to Training. So we're going to be referring a little bit to both in the gym and also from a kind of sporting point of view as well, because with the government guidelines, obviously there's going to be clubs returning to training. So rugby clubs will be back as an example, and sort of outdoor sports. So all of a sudden you've got guys who have been in lockdown for a long time. Everyone, you'll have some who've kept on top of things and some who've been eating a few biscuits. So we'll see. It's like that meme that was going around with Thor. You've got the two Thors. You've got the one in incredible shape, and then the one who in that one where
lockdown
Thor, where he just lets himself go. Thor. So there'll be a few sloppy rigs on return. So we'll see who's being honest and who hasn't. So as I say, the main kind of chat today will be based around that, guys. So obviously no one better to have on board than Max for this podcast. Obviously, mate, there's going to be a hell of a lot of excitement. There's going to be people who haven't been to the gym for months, or they haven't run around on the rugby field for months, and the temptation to go from 0 to turbo in under 3 seconds is going to be it's going to be very tempting. You haven't seen a barbell for 3 months or 4 months, and the temptation to go a bit silly, the temptation on the rugby pitch or whatever it is. I must apologise to guys for always using rugby as a reference, but that just comes naturally, obviously, because I play a bit.
You've got that in there.
So how do we deal with that, mate? How would you advise people to manage avoiding going from 0 to turbo?
So there's loads of different layers you can put on this and different spins you can put on it. But sort of with injury management as with training, we're very much the same opinion that your injury management and your S&C, your training, it's one and the same. If you're doing it well and you're integrating things properly, it's one and the same thing. So it's not just a question of coming back and saying, oh, I'm going to do more stretching. It's not just a question of saying you're going to do more like prehab stuff. Like ultimately, like a lot of injuries happen because you do too much too soon after doing too little too long.
Yeah,
that's a nice little quote there. That's a good.
I like that. Yeah. Well, I'll jot that down for the next Instagram post.
But yeah, too much too soon after too little too long. So like people who have been massively sedentary suddenly, and it kind of, without having to go too much into the science or the physiology behind it, it just intuitively, like people understand that it's right. Like people understand that, first time you go back to the gym and do a load of squats after a while, especially if you do either a load of squats or a load of weight when you squat, like your legs are very, very sore. It's as simple as that. Like, whereas obviously if you're, again, we keep going to the idea of like the power lifters or whatnot, but like they squat 2-3 times a week, chances are after most squat sessions, they're not actually in any pain. They're not actually getting any kind of leg bombs. And if you take that to, if you take that further, if you kind of extrapolate that out, I know soreness doesn't necessarily kind of always line up with muscle damage, so to speak, or soreness doesn't necessarily line up with inflammation exactly. But like if you take that further and further and further, if you do too much too soon, like something goes pop, basically. Whether you're talking purely about training too hard, coming in and doing your 1 rep max on a deadlift, whether you talk about going and playing 80 minutes of rugby on the first day back, but whatever it is, whatever your kind of arena is, whether it's, again, like the rugby example is always there, but whether it's football, whether you're a marathon runner, whether you come and do metcons, whether you come and do barbell club, like you ease back in slowly. It stands to reason. You don't want to be waddling out of the gym and not coming back for 2 weeks because you can't get out of bed.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I'm going to, sort of expand on that, but first of all, sort of take it right back to what you were saying about, as we both know, injury management and S&C are as one, and it's and one of the most exciting things when you came on board, it was only a few months after we opened, wasn't it, or maybe a year after we opened, was that obviously my sort of early stage sports rehab knowledge is I have a working understanding, but I'm not a sports therapist. But what I did know was that there needed to be more synergy in the industry generally, between the treatment table and return to play, and sort of filling in the gaps from traditional physiotherapy of, right, let's stick the elbow in there, let's do whatever it is to to help with that sort of stage 1, stage 2 work. But really, it's getting guys back in the gym and strengthening them so they can absorb the forces required to for whatever activity it is they're doing, whether it's just general strength training, powerlifting, rugby, getting strong enough to absorb the forces necessary so that we're not back on the treatment table. And I think that's just a huge development in the industry. I'm going off on a slight tangent here, but
no, but it's a worthwhile tangent talking about. Like I'm gonna I'll ruffle some feathers and I'll probably piss off an entire profession in one statement here. But like in general, I think considering physios are don't get me wrong, like physiotherapists are excellent at what they do. Like even like sports medicine doctors and orthopedic surgeons are very, very good at what they do. But on the whole, their kind of formal education on exercise prescription is absolute garbage. Like if they have any. And don't get me wrong, like there are good physiotherapists out there who will take an active knowledge, even just through their own training or from being in the right environments, who take an active knowledge in learning about S&C, whether it's just because they train themselves and they like to keep fit and they're someone that's always been a bit of a kind of gym bunny or whatnot. Or people, a common route is to go like a sports science undergrad and then do a full-time physio master's. And in my experience, like people that have gone down that route into physiotherapy make the best physios. They're one or two of the best physios I've ever worked with. Do a sports science undergrad and then go on to a physio master's. But it's because otherwise you see so many times physios or sports therapists or osteos or whatnot that have only ever worked in a really, really clinical environment. As you say, like someone will come in with back pain, for example.
Yeah.
You know, they've sat at a desk 8 hours a day for the last 20 odd years. They don't know how to lift weights. Their movement quality and their movement tolerance and their movement capacity is terrible. And a physio, I'll just do some sports massage. We'll just do some soft tissue work, and then we'll teach you like the most basic pelvic tilt, stretch your hips out a little bit, and expect them to then be able to tolerate the demands of whether it's like actual physical training, whether it's just the demands of daily life. Like it just doesn't do enough.
Well, that's it. It's a band-aid approach, isn't it? Often, you know, and I always say we're not, you know, there's some very, very, very good physios out there as well. But yeah, that's, you know, typically what you'd normally see in the industry is that band-aid of like, right, okay, we've got an injury, let's mask that pain, which is obviously great and makes you feel a bit better. And then you go out there and it's like, guess what happens? You know, you've not addressed the problem, you know, at all. You know, I remember tearing a hamstring like in, you know, my very young rugby days, and it's like,
do you play?
Yeah,
rugby, do you?
I do. Yeah, I do a bit. Yeah, I do a bit. We'll talk about. I'll list off. I'll list off the CV and list the achievements later. But if we get time at the end, but like it was like exactly that stage one, you know, physio, and then it was like, right, off you go, and it's like it was weak as piss. Like the hamstring couldn't absorb the forces of the game, and guess what? Got in, tore it again.
Pop again.
Tore it again. And it's like, Go on.
Sorry, yeah, you go on. I'm interrupting you there.
No, I was just going to say, like, and that's, you know, that's just a really common thing that you see. So getting guys back on, you know, into the gym before we go to the field is important.
And I think it kind of, that sort of work serves a purpose. I think I'll frame it in there. Like, I have clients on the couch at MSC. Like, I have clients that do soft tissue work, I do low level stuff, I do breathing work and whatnot. But if we look at it again, like I use the case of back pain. You know, if someone gets back pain when they go like when they spend a long time walking, or when they try and pick something up off the floor, they can't lift weights out of the back hurting and whatnot, then, you know, the soft tissue work and the low level kind of almost like Pilates-esque, like hip mobility drills, core control drills, and the soft tissue work, it's a purpose in that a lot of the time it's what you should be doing, or in my opinion, how I work and what I feel is the right way based on all the evidence and the education I've had and practice and whatnot. Like, that sort of stuff can be used, but it should be used to get symptoms under control so that you can then go and load those structures. So like if you get pain deadlifting, right, okay, we're going to do some soft tissue work, we're going to stretch your hips, we're going to do some massage on your back, we're going to teach you to breathe and brace, so that I can go out and get a barbell in your hand and you can go and strengthen your hips and your back. And that should be the process of how things move. And, you know, depending on what people want to get back to, what people's idea of kind of function is, again, like I hate the word functional, but sometimes it has to be used.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But, you know, depending on what your idea of being functional is, you know, your end point and the complexity of your rehab is going to vary massively. And again, we always end up kind of having the example of like powerlifters or rugby players. They're like, for anytime I have a conversation with Luke, we have some really good conversations, but you know, if he's got a low grade muscle strain or something like that from squatting or deadlifting, I always say like it's a really, really easy rehab, because in theory, like I say, if you're someone who wants to go back to playing rugby, right, okay, we get the pain under control with your sports massage or with your stretching and whatnot. The first step is, right, okay, we need to get you back lifting weights. Once we get your back or your hamstring or whatever it is nice and strong, then we can start introducing jumping and landing, we can start reintroducing running, and we can just progressively build those layers and make it more complex. Whereas if you're a powerlifter, it's just a question of, right, okay, we'll just reduce the volume and intensity down low enough. Yeah. So you've got an entry point, you can start working again, and then you build up from there.
Yeah. Whereas I think
we're kind of talking.
Sorry, go on, carry on.
I'm saying we're kind of talking about it in the scope of, you know, someone that's got back pain or people that are just coming back to the gym now. But ultimately, it always comes back to this idea that I drill with all of my clients all the time. It's finding an appropriate entry point to loading. And like I say, if someone comes in with acute back pain, it might be that entry point is then they go on to doing deadlifts with an empty barbell, or they go on to doing practicing a hip hinge and an RDL with a broomstick. That might be their entry point, because anything above that might cause them pain.
Yeah.
And then, you know, once we can get you doing a hip hinge, even just body weight, standing up, bending forward at the waist, right, okay, let's do that with an empty barbell. Let's put 2.5 kilo plates on. You know, before you know it, 6 weeks down the line, they're doing barbell body weight RDLs.
Yeah.
But again, like that kind of process of progressively building load and progressively exposing people to work and strengthening, it kind of gets missed out. People say, right, okay, well, again, like physios and osteos in the classic sense, a very clinical way, to be right, okay, we'll do some soft tissue work. Does it hurt anymore? Right, off you go, see how it feels training. And there's not that kind of gradual build-up.
Yeah. Man, I love it. It's the powerlifting and weightlifting one's interesting, because I think, you know, a few years back, or well, still now very common, you know, when someone does pick up that niggle or whatever, it's like, oh God, I've got to stop lifting, you know, and then I've got to roll around on, you know, on the floor for 45 minutes doing hip drills, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and I think, you know, for anyone listening who has had, you know, injuries and, you know, even long-term injuries, and that happens, and then they just have that early stage physio, or sometimes not even that, and then just wait. You know, there's amateur, you know, athletes out there who, you know, will tear an ACL and then just wait 12 months and then just go back to playing, and, you know, thinking, right, okay, I've just got to rest, let that heal, and then go back. And it's like you're missing out like a huge important component.
Exactly that.
You're missing the whole. You're missing the whole rehabilitation process. You know, just sitting around just waiting for it to heal. It's not. You know, we know now through the last couple of decades of research that that's not the optimal way. And then they're going back in and trying to play a sport or an activity, or it can even be, you know, back in the gym. You know, this works with both examples. You know, and trying to, you know, thinking they're prepared to take those forces and absorb those forces, whether that's a heavy deadlift or whether that's playing a game of football and trying to change direction. And it's like, well, you've got zero strength, you know, in and around the joint. You've got no stability, no eccentric strength to absorb, you know, the forces that, you know, you're going to undertake. So I would
sport actually places on you.
Exactly. So it's like getting that, and that's again where the synergy comes in, where it's like you've got to be, you know, the strength and the strengthening is the rehabilitation process. Like it's all in one.
Exactly that. And there's a really good quote. I know I've already given you one time, but there's another one where, you know, people kind of see in people's heads, they think of, right, okay, if I want to get better at performance, it's weightlifting, it's powerlifting, it's squat, deadlift. If I want to manage injury, it's stretching, it's foam rolling, it's mobility drills. Whereas again, the kind of first layer, and like I said, this kind of entry point that I always talk about people is, right, okay, well, regardless of what your end goal is, the base foundation and the first part of injury management, okay, we can't really progress, we shouldn't progress until we have this in there in some measure, is push, pull, squat, hinge, carry. That's the first layer, right? Can we get you to do all of those? If you're then someone whose idea of full function is, right, I'm going to go and play football, okay, maybe the hinge becomes important because hamstring strains are going to be quite prevalent in your sport. Maybe the squat should be a split squat because knee injuries are quite prevalent in your sport. So like push, pull, squat, hinge, carry, they're like the bases, and we just kind of tweak how often we do those, how hard we work on each of those, like the specifics, the technique of what we use and where we put those in your week might vary depending on what your idea of full function is. But that's the base layer. If we don't have those in there, again, the other quote that is really, really good. You know, if we're just relying on, okay, we're just going to be doing like hamstring stretching, we're just going to be doing thoracic mobility to try and make something more flexible overhead, until you've got those big basic patterns in there and a good basic strength training program in there, so you've got a good base layer of strength and a good tolerance in key muscle groups. All you're doing with mobility exercises, all you're doing with like corrective exercises and band drills, is you're trying to optimize a system that is inherently fragile in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's all well and good trying to make things work better and trying to make things work efficiently, but if the actual output and the tolerance of the system and your body as a whole is really low, you can optimize it all you want. You're just not going to get much out of it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm a
You're not going to get any return on investment. Whereas,
it's like I can get more extension in my T-spine. I can, get in the better position pressing overhead. Great. Like what?
You're still going to crumple like a paper bag if there's any force involved in that. You can get into a better position overhead, but you're not strong enough to actually hold a barbell over there. You're not strong enough, if you're a rugby player, you're not strong enough to absorb the forces in the tackle. 15-stone bloke runs at your full pelt and it hits you in your arm there. Your shoulder's still going to pop out because you've got no force behind it. So again, we have these basics in place. And for most people, actually, for the first couple of years of training, it's just a question of drilling those. You cycle them in and out. It might be that they front squat for 3 months, and they back squat for a few months, and the hex bar for a few months. But okay, that's still them working on their squat pattern. Outside of that, realistically, again, like I said, if they're doing the sport with a lot of high-speed running, yes, they might need to do their Nordics. Yes, they might need to do their calf raises and their ankle stiffness, maybe some jumps and some fires and whatnot. But again, it's all kind of details around what should be like the big main pillars, which is just good basic strength training. And again, like I say, this idea of where injury management comes into it, where the injury focus comes into it, depending on what your current level of pain or disability or inflammation is we adjust your entry point into that. Let's say if you're someone who's fully fit, has no issues whatsoever, and you've just been off the gym for a few months because it's been lockdown, right? Okay, your entry point might be you're still going to back squat. You're still going to be someone who needs to do a low bar. You're still going to be wearing a belt and wearing lifters because you're at a good level, it's good basic strength. But our entry point is just, okay, we're not maxing out on day one. We're taking it sensible with 6 and 7 RPEs, that kind of thing. Whereas if someone comes in, they've just had an ACL operation, their entry point might be a goblet squat and just learning to move their hips and bend their knee again. Yeah. Their entry point might be they're doing a split squat at body weight and just learning not to fall over.
Yeah.
Same with back pain. Again, like a power lifter with no issues. Again, I don't think that exists, a power lifter with no issues or injury history. But if they're coming back in the gym after lockdown, they're doing deadlifts, but they're doing it with a low weight or a relatively low RPE for them based on their training history. Whereas if you're someone that's had crippling back pain for months, your entry point to a deadlift is just learning how to hip hinge. You're holding a broomstick against your spine and learning how to keep it straight.
Yeah.
But again, it just keeps coming back. Like you're not doing anything outside of what a proper strength training program should be. You're just dialing it up or down depending on where you're at. So you're getting your entry point and then you're using an appropriate rate of progression. So again, it's simple. We need to be getting stronger, and we're trying to drill these 5 kind of key patterns and improve them over time. Sometimes people are going to be really, really efficient movers. Sometimes they're going to have a really good base strength level. So you can be really aggressive with how you progress those, and you can add weight every week. You can push quite hard to the point where every 4 weeks you're hitting maybe heavy singles or doubles or triples or whatever it might be, depending on how you program. Whereas other people, you might need to be really, really slow and just add 2 kilos a week for the next 3 months.
Good old progressive overload. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. And like I said, it varies from individual to individual. And like I said, if you're someone who's got a good level of base strength, then it's a question of, okay, well, like we might need to optimize that system by adding in mobility sessions for you. We might need to add in some hip stretches so you can squat a little bit deeper. But again, like I say, you can optimize the system. You can start adding in the classic kind of rehab exercises once you've got the basics in place. Again, I think people. Sorry, go on, mate.
No, I was going to jump in and just say, like with what you've mentioned there, with the 5 movements, that's both the we talk about the simplicity and the complexity of S&C. So the simplicity is that we could look at those 5 movements, knee, knee, hinge, push, pull, carry, getting those 5 movements right. And as you say, pretty much everybody's going to be doing those movements, but the complexity, if you can call it that, and it's not really that complex, is just like say, selecting that entry point. So it's like, and that's from a injury rehabilitation point of view, a return to play point of view, but also from a just generally getting back into the gym point of view, isn't it? Like you say, it's like, okay, you can, if you're a powerlifter, you can deadlift from day one. When you come back, that's fine. But then it's just a case of like, right, that's my exercise selection. And then in terms of monitoring, volume and intensity, then, okay, obviously German volume training, 10-10s isn't going to be the best option. Doing a 1 rep max, is not the best option. So my exercise selection is cool. That's fine. I can go in at that point. And then, as you say, from an injury point of view, it's like, right, my exercise selection, right, I need that deadlift type pattern, but I'm not ready for a deadlift because I've hurt my back. And like you say, it's like a hip, let's get the broomstick, let's do some light RDL work or whatever, whatever it might be. So I just think that's a really fascinating example of both the simplicity and the complexity of SNC. It's like the simplicity is that, me and Luke talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where it was like, if me and him could quite easily, train together in a session. We've both got, if we were squatting together, it'd be doing a lot more weight, and the rack height might be a bit of an issue. But we're both, he might be back squatting and I might be front squatting, or I might be doing a box squat. But we're both doing a squat pattern. With the deadlift, he might be doing a conventional deadlift, I might be doing a trap bar deadlift. So again, you're just adjusting the pattern based on the desired outcome. And in his example, wanting to be, a powerlifter, me, with the rugby. So it's like, and with a bench press, we might both just bench press, or, I might do a floor press or whatever it might be. There's actually quite, a lot of similarity, like I say, getting those five points and, and those kind of 5 movement patterns and drilling those and getting strong. And then the complexity comes from like, and complexity is probably not the right word, but, a little bit more sort of thinking is done on, right, what, like you say, what's the entry point? Let's look at, injury. Let's look at sport or desired outcomes and goals. And let's also look at like, what's the base now? And the guys coming back into the gym now, the base probably is going to, you might have been keeping fit with bands and whatnot and doing the best you can. Maybe you've got a dumbbell or a kettlebell, but you've got to just understand that base, haven't you? And then, like I say, day one we can deadlift, but let's just manage the load. But yeah, I just thought
exactly
it was a good
exactly
example.
That. But again, going back to kind of what you said about this typical kind of therapeutic stuff or injury management, people think it's just a question of foam rolling and stretching and versus strength training. I think people kind of see the two as mutually exclusive. Yeah. And they say, right, okay, well, I can't deadlift because I've got a bad back. So what I do is I come in and stretch and foam roll for a bit and do some glute bridges, and then I'm going to go and do bench and chins. Whereas actually, realistically, if we're really smart about it, then okay, the session plan is you come in, you've got 10 or 15 minutes of kind of mobility, foam rolling, stretching, all those kind of things, but they should be kind of quite specific to you and targeted to say, right, okay, well, your goal is, if you've got, again, if we go back to say the back injury, you need to be foam rolling, stretching, doing like activation or recruitment drills or whatever it is that get you to the point where you can do your chosen form of deadlifting or your chosen form of hip hinging. They should be there to reduce your symptoms enough that you can then load that pattern and load the areas or load the muscle groups that are going to move you forward for the long term. So again, your example of your hamstring strain, we know that stronger core, stronger lower back, stronger glutes, stronger hamstrings are what's going to minimize that injury risk over time. If you've got a tight or a sore hamstring, especially like we need to roll, we need to stretch, and we need to do the work that's going to let you go through RDLs, it's going to let you go through Nordics, and it's going to let you progress that for the next 6 weeks to rebuild and re-strengthen and rehab that hamstring. Yeah. So again, like I say, it's a question of these things aren't mutually exclusive. It's just a question of, like, okay, we need to learn how to put them together sequentially to build up your program so that actually over time you're building physical capacity. You're not just coming in doing foam rolling for 6 weeks in the hope that the hamstring pain goes away. But okay, we need to be using this strength training as a means of building capacity, like I said, making sure the system as a whole, your body as a whole, is getting more and more robust over time. And again, like I said, how you mix that up. I know you said it's kind of the complexity, it's the kind of, it's the art form of coaching, isn't it? Like I say, it's actually using your own experience and looking at someone and how they move and saying, right, well, this person needs to do an RDL, not a deadlift, or this person needs to do a snatch grip, or this person needs a hex bar, etc., etc. And it's just knowing how to blend those together to make sure they come in and they've got an hour to an hour and a half of work where they're working from warm-up mobility into their strength and power and doing everything that's kind of going to completely target all the areas that are completely relevant to them and their needs.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, doing your drills on the floor for 15 minutes and then integrating that into the relevant movement patterns and loading them accordingly. I think is essentially what we're looking at. Yeah. I think like just to talk about kind of dosing those kind of volume, the volume and intensity when we come back. I think the key thing is because again, going back to sort of talking about entry point and entry level of going back. We talk about sort of weight training specifically at the moment, but this will also carry over to like field-based and running-based stuff. Important thing of getting back into the gym now is going to be identifying where we're at. Maybe we've had access to no equipment, minimal equipment, or maybe we've been fortunate had access to lots of equipment. Identifying that kind of entry level, and then just basically realizing how easy it's going to be to create a stimulus and a stress, and therefore an adaptation. I think that's really important for people to remember is like, obviously with strength training, a good strength and conditioning practitioner will always look for the minimal dosing to produce the required outcome and the required adaptation. We're not looking to like destroy ourselves and be sore for, a week or 2 weeks afterwards. That's going to have a knock-on effect on, frequency of training and the recovery and the rest of the things we're trying to do. But I just think that's a really important thing for people to be aware of is that, if the base level is quite low, just enjoy those beginner gains again.
Yeah. Treat yourself like you're someone that's completely new to training.
Treat yourself. You mentioned it briefly. Add 2.5 kilos each week. Don't go mad with the volume. Like if you haven't done any training, come in and hitting 2 sets of 8 on 6 or 7 different exercises for a few weeks, and adding a couple of kilos or gradually adding a little bit of volume is gonna do the trick quite nicely. You're in an unusual position where the minimal dosing, which is what we're always looking for, or generally speaking,
you want to be aware of at least.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's going to be like your base level's like down here, so don't go back up high to try and stimulate that. It's going to be really easy to stimulate, to create some stimulus. Exactly
that. And it's almost on the flip side of that as well. Like it's going to be incredibly easy to make yourself very sore and very tired.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, like I say, come in, do enough work to move around and sweat a little bit and just put a little bit of load through your body. But actually, like that's all we need. That's literally all we need. Like it's going to be hard. Don't get me wrong, because people are going to be so excited to come back in, and people are going to want to use everything, and people are want to come in and put a load of plates on the bar and say, right, well, I haven't used much weight in ages, so the first thing I want to do is use loads of weight. But actually, it's a question of if you look at it the other way around, it's actually you're in a lucky position where you can get a lot stronger now quite quickly from not having to work very hard at all. And then 8, 10, 12, 16 weeks down the line, when you start to plateau a little bit, you've still got the option then of saying, right, okay, now I can go heavier, or now I can do more volume, now I can get to the point where I want to do. If you really have to, you can go and do 10 sets of 10. But like, I mean, there's better things to do. Obviously, we both know that. But it's with young athletes or people who've never been in the gym before. It's the same kind of idea as what experienced athletes coming back into the gym now should be thinking. The less trained you are, the easier it is to get an adaptation. The easier it is to force your body to adapt and improve and get stronger, get bigger, whatever it is, get more powerful. It's very, very easy to do that when you haven't had a stimulus for a long time. Whereas if you come straight back in, or if you're a 15-year-old that's never been to the gym before, and the first thing you do is start pulling 1 rep maxes every as you get older, by the time you get to 20, it's going to be so hard to progress because you've just used that sledgehammer of a stimulus from day one. Whereas again, if you just come in now, easy stuff, like you said, 2 sets of 8, 6 or 7 different exercises, you get 6 months down the line, you've still got the option in your back pocket of saying, right, okay, now I'm going to start using heavy training because I need it to force an overload. I need it to get better because my body's gotten used to everything else.
Play the long game. It always, it comes back to that, doesn't it? Play the long game. Don't try and I know there's going to be a bit of pressure with summer approaching to get shredders, as quickly as possible. But play the long game. Honestly, it's like say to get that required minimum dose is going to be so easy. It's it's going to for more experienced trainers. It's going to take you back to the glory days of of lifting a bit of weight and putting a bit of mass on and getting stronger. It's going to be those kind of beginner days of add 2.5 kilos again. Enjoy it, embrace it, use it as an opportunity to develop skill. To develop technique.
But from going back to kind of from an injury perspective as well, I'm going to speak in a massive, broad, sweeping generalization here, but like, no one's ever gotten seriously injured doing 2 sets of 10 at a 7 RPE.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't happen. Like people hurt themselves doing stupid stuff. People hurt themselves when there's 90% plus weight on the bar. People hurt themselves when they're doing 9 RPEs. People hurt themselves when they're doing 10 RPEs with failure, that kind of stuff. You get overuse injuries. You get, whether you want to call it repetitive strain injuries, overuse, whatever you want to call it, tendinopathies. That happens when you do an excessive volume or intensity or both, or some combination of both, or you're not recovering properly. Whereas like people don't piss things off when you're doing sensible stuff, moderate volume, moderate to low intensity. And again, like why expose yourself to that risk when, let's say, you've just had however many months off the gym, 4, 5, 6 months off the gym. You can progress so easily doing not a huge amount and not really having to work very hard. Why expose yourself to the risk of injury? Why expose yourself to the risk of missing another couple of weeks or another couple of months training when there's absolutely no reason to do it other than ego?
You don't need to. You literally don't need to. Like now more than ever. And even experienced lifters, you look at people who, you again keep talking about like minimal dose, and like that doesn't mean, you're not working hard or you're not doing anything, but it's the minimal dose required to continue to progress. And you look at experienced lifters, and like, don't always have to be, or don't often have to be, around your sort of 9 RPEs, plus. It's, if you're programming smart, then and
a lot of submaximal work. It's a lot of skill work, like you say.
Skill development, I'm not saying if you're coming back in and just put the ego on. If you're coming back in as a moderate to advanced, gym goer, and you've not had access to kit, and you're thinking, the ego's thinking, right, crikey, I can't be seen to be, squatting a plate each side. Just swallow the pride a little bit, develop the technique, and nobody's going to judge you anyway, because it's been
it's not that kind of place.
It's been it's not. Well, MSC's not that kind of place, but like but also like everyone's been in that same boat in the last year where like they haven't had access to what they would have wanted. So use it as a chance to develop skill and get better, and just enjoy the opportunity to progressively overload. If you're a powerlifter and you're having to work at a very very moderate volume and very low to moderate intensity, and that's still making you a bit sore in between sessions, use that as an opportunity to lower your frequency a bit with your powerlifting training, and dare I say it, do a bit of aerobic work on the side. Maybe I shouldn't have used powerlifters as an example there, but like that, and I'm saying powerlifter, I mean it's just anyone who's doing general strength training, to be honest. Is use the opportunity to think, right, okay, let's play the long game here. Let's let's say moderate to low frequency, intensity, volume. Let's use the gaps in between to build that aerobic base, perhaps, so the work capacity is better as I build up my volume with my weights. Let's get some steps in. Let's improve body composition with my nutrition, etc. So I think you just gotta People are just going to have to you're going to have to swallow some ego, swallow some pride, build up nice and slowly, just enjoy the fact that you're back in the gym, enjoy the fact that you're going to get some beginner gains, look to, other, use it as an opportunity to develop, other areas, to develop skills, etc., etc. I'm just going to pull it back slightly, actually, to, we're talking about that entry point, and where am I? Where I need to, where do I start off? I'm going to do a shameless plug of the Barbell Club here, because I think it's really relevant, and the massive advantage that people coming back to MSC and coming back to the Barbell Club is going to be is that individualization and personal coaching aspect of monitoring the program, monitoring the loads and intensities that we do. So with the Barbell Club, obviously you get assigned a personal coach who's, let's say, doing those things, in touch with you during the week, through messaging, getting feedback forms, feedback questionnaires of how we're feeling, prescribing, loads and, and adapting exercise selection, and obviously going to train in the group. But that individualization is going to be really important, because you're going to have, maybe, one of our guys is going to have had access to maybe some of the kit we lent out, like a barbell, a squat stand, and enough plates to continue to work at near maximum capacity with their squat or their deadlift. So them coming back in, rather than just that blanket of like, right, everybody's doing 2 sets of 6 at 5 RPE, is actually like, you've got that personal coach there to say, right, Andrew, you've been squatting all the way through. Obviously, we can be hitting this instead, or hitting that, and
a bit more aggressive, or a bit more
exactly, or
change exercise selection around, or
pull it back a little bit. So that's little plug for the Barbell Club there. If you're interested, slide in our DMs and get some details. I think that's interesting, mate. Look, mate, we've had a hell of a chat there. That's been great. Let me have a look at my notes. What else have we got to go into? Let's talk a little bit, if you're happy to move on. From the gym, or not move on from the gym, but just talk about a little bit more with your outdoor athletes being allowed to return. What are the considerations needed for? Again, apologies for using it as an example. It's just easy for me to do it and a bit lazy. But for rugby guys, we're back in a couple of weeks, I think. And then what are the considerations to take in place there? I imagine it's very similar to the gym.
Again, like it's a question of managing your. Again, like it's a question of managing volume and intensity. I think the variable that we have to consider when we start to talk about anything where you're talking about running-based sports, whether it is literally a question of someone distance running, whether it's a question of rugby players or footballers or netballers or hockey players or whatever it might be, the variable we have to consider is speed and velocity of movement. Because again, the higher the speed that you're traveling at, or the more explosive the actions you're performing, the faster the muscles have to contract, the greater the injury risk, or the bigger the stress of those muscles are, the bigger the stress of those actions are on the body. So again, as you know, you don't tear your hamstring walking, you tear your hamstring top end running, or hard change direction or hard deceleration. So if you're going back into a training program where everything's kind of small-sided games, everything's kind of quite short, small pitches, not a huge amount of top end running, the biggest thing you can control, really, the biggest thing you should be looking to control is ultimately time on feet. The kind of the method of kind of working out workload of like RPE times minutes. There's a lot of value in that. I think it's been kind of refuted a lot in some evidence this year and some research this year. But the biggest thing you can do if you're doing fairly consistent things, as far as consistent training drills and consistent structured training, is just managing the amount of time that you train for and building that sensibly. If you go straight back in And as a rugby player, you're doing like full-sided games, you're doing 15 aside, and you're doing like 2-hour sessions. You're going to blow yourself out of the water, or you're going to get blown out of the water by a coach that's just going to go whistle happy and trigger happy. You know, building up to a sensible amount of time on the feet is the biggest thing you can do, really, to manage injury there. And again, if alongside that you can progressively increase the size of the pitch, so that you kind of you're taking care of the amount of opportunities there are to hit top speed, then you're going to be kind of doing, when considering you've got infinite variables of different gameplay and team tactics and other players to worry about. If you're doing half an hour at a time in a relatively small pitch, you know, even if it's the most chaotic game in the world, there's only so much high-speed running you can do in that.
You can't open up. Yeah, you can't open up.
Exactly. You physically can't, because the constraints of the game are such that actually there's just not the opportunity to do so. Whereas, like you said, if you go back in first day and it's 7-on-7, full pitch, full speed, then chances are you're going to be doing a lot of high-speed running. You're going to get a lot of people getting hit by snipers and dropping down the hamstrings and calves. So again, like with the best will in the world, realistically, we've been around rugby coaches enough to know that, like, realistically, it's probably not going to be managed like this at a lot of clubs.
Yeah, I think that's. Sorry, go on.
But again, like if you go to a club where there's someone there employed as an S&C coach, or someone employed to do sports science and manage these kind of things, you've got a coach who listens to these kind of things, then it's great, because actually, like I said, chances are these things can be put in place. In an ideal world, what you have is, like I said, a lot of technical, tactical stuff, a lot of kind of, small-sided games in small pitches. You'd have a lot of like technical drills. You'd have a lot of unit practice. And then on the side, alongside that, you do really controlled top speed exposures. So it might be a question of like, you know, you do your team warm-up. And this is something that we've talked about a lot, and it's something you've been spending a load of time doing, isn't it? You know, if you can, outside of your rugby training, if once or twice a week you can do sprints where you hit top speed, that's the best thing you can do to actually make yourself faster as an athlete. But you can guarantee you're hitting top speed 5 times in one training session, and you're doing that twice a week. Then as soon as you go back to rugby, if you have to hit top speed 3 times in a game or in a training session, your body's accustomed to that. This idea of entry point and rate of progression, if you can do your own standalone speed training, whether it's on the track in the gym at MSC, whether it's up and down the road outside your house, if you're hitting top speed regularly and you're maintaining a certain workload of that, then again, your entry point when you go back into rugby, your entry point of what you have to put yourself through in a rugby training session is going to be tolerable. You're going to be able to tolerate that because you've acquired a base level of tolerance to high speed running. Whereas again, the worst thing you can do is just say, right, okay, well, I'm in lockdown, so I can't play rugby. I'm just going to do press ups and squats and sit ups at home. And then when I go back, we're going to play full 7-on-7, full pitch.
Go turbo, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're in trouble because again, you've done no running. And then you've gone back into probably the most chaotic, most high speed environment you can. Because again, like I say, one of the biggest tools, we spoke about it really early on, probably this time last year, just around a podcast, what you can do to maintain your fitness for rugby. We said get outside and sprint, because not only the most powerful, most explosive thing you can do is going to keep you powerful and explosive, it's going to make sure your hamstrings can still tolerate a game of rugby.
So the key thing there is, you know, to sort of, you know, simplify and almost not conclude, but just simplify that a little bit for rugby coaches going back, is we've got almost like 3 key concepts there, haven't we? We've got minutes, you know, which we need to consider, pitch size, which I think is a great shout, and out of, you know, training at, you know, at home or in the gym, you know, stuff away from the rugby pitch. There's 3 main considerations there. Like, you know, say it's very similar to the gym example of like, I haven't done anything and then I'm going to go back in and do 10 sets of 10. It's probably not the smartest thing to do. And it's the same from the field point of view, where it's like, right, I've not done any running or have been very minimal, and then I'm going to go and do 120 minutes, you know, of running around. The pitch aspect in terms of like that's a great one, I think, for if there's any rugby coaches listening or any field coaches listening, that's a great simple way to reduce the risk of being exposed to those high forces. There's not a lot that produces as much force as a sprint, and the reality is the guys aren't going to be ready for that, condition for that. So rather than playing perhaps full width and even a half pitch or full pitch touch, because and this is a coach's responsibility, I think, because the like rugby players, when we go back to play rugby, we're like kids. It's like, give me the ball, want to play rugby, and it'd be so easy to like, you can't control that on an individual basis and say, oh, don't sprint, don't do this, don't do that. It's like dealing with children, really. So you've got to say, right, okay, I'm gonna take that toy away from you, and I'm gonna reduce the size of the pitch, fill the numbers a little bit, so that we haven't got an opportunity, and those simple rugby folk won't even realise that. They'll just be happy to get the ball in their hands. So take that away from them. Reducing the size of the pitch is a big one. And then, as you say, outside of that, start building up, tolerance to those kind of forces. Start with your heels, build into your flats, increase that speed gradually. And then you got that nice, again, using the word synergy, that nice synergy together where as we increase the size of the pitch, we increase the minutes, we increase the opportunities to open up into top speeds. We're prepared from that because on the training, we've been doing our sprints and we've been doing our weight training as well to be strong enough to absorb that impact.
And again, like I said, it comes back kind of to the first point we made at the very start of this, where your injury management and your performance training is not mutually exclusive. They're one and the same thing. And again, it just comes down to exposing yourself as much as possible to the demands of your arena. Like I say, whether it's an office worker who's too stiff to be able to sit in an office chair for 8 days, or it's a rugby player that needs to tolerate sprinting. It's not a question of injury management requires stretching and foam rolling, and performance training requires sprinting and Olympic weightlifting. It's one and the same thing. It's making sure you have a tolerance to the demands of your arena. And that's just a question of, like I said, too much too soon after too little for too long. Okay, great. Well, at this point now, if you're looking at getting back playing rugby in 6 weeks, you start sprinting now.
Yeah. And
again, you get twice a week, hit top speed regularly for the next 6 weeks. All of a sudden, like I said, it's not a shock to the system when you go back.
We're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's changing the mindset. It's changing the way of thinking to understanding that they are one and the same thing. Training is injury management. Injury management is just appropriate training. How much you kind of mix those elements together and how you put that together is between you and your coach, or whether it's an SC coach or a sports scientist or someone you work with. But yeah, it's one and the same thing. It's the same process.
100%, mate. 100%. Anything to add there in regards to return to field, return to sport? I think we've covered some good content.
That's a series of podcasts in itself, isn't it? Like I said, the same, whatever sport you're talking about. If you're talking about netball, the same could be talked about in terms of like jump and land, the amount of ACLs and the amount of ankle sprains you see in netball, because it's loads of essentially like landing on one foot, change of direction aggressively on and off one foot, pivoting on one foot. Rugby, shoulders and necks, managing the collision can be done exactly the same. You can build up from one-on-one little wrestling drills in controlled situations to full scrummage in 8-on-8. Again, netball players can start building up different jump and land techniques. It's exactly the same thing of, right, okay, we need to kind of break down our sport into, okay, where am I likely to get injured and how can I water that down and start doing it now, so that by the time I do it in chaos with other people around me at full game speed in a few weeks' time, I've started to build the foundation. I'm prepared for that. And again, it's recognizing, okay, where I'm most likely to get hurt and how can I kind of break that down into its constituent parts and start to build a tolerance for that. It's not a question of, right, okay, if I'm a netball player, I'm probably going to roll my ankles, so I should probably start stretching my calves now. It's a completely different process.
I think it's like, it comes back to like vertical integration when we're training for sports as well, doesn't it? It's like, you're going to get some guys going back now into the gym, and it's like, right, just going to do hypertrophy work, just going to build some mass, and it's like, that's cool, and that's like, that's arguably going to be a primary objective. But alongside that, don't be afraid to sort of expose yourself once a week, even, twice a week, probably a bit better, to doing some
fast running, some lateral movement,
to doing some sprints. And, it's, if the volume and frequency is low enough, it's, even with aerobic work, it's not gonna ruin your gains. Don't worry. So it's that vertical integration model of like train everything all the time, but just prioritize certain components, certain aspects in terms of your intensity, your frequency, your volume. So as I say, like, okay, we're not playing a game potentially till September. So you might think, right, well, I don't need to be sprinting at top speeds now. And it's like, well, actually, okay, that's not a primary objective, and it's a fantastic opportunity to build some muscle mass, build some tissue tolerance, do some hypertrophy work. And you're absolutely correct in, you'd be absolutely correct in presuming that. But don't be afraid to do a little bit, the minimal dosing you can, without interfering with that stuff, of starting to get your sprints in, starting to do a bit of aerobic work, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like, during this period, you could have had, all the time off from doing aerobic work and not done any. But what you would have been better off doing is like, at least once a week. Maybe
even if you're just using it as a recovery tool as opposed to a main training objective.
Exactly, real low level. A bit of blue and green zone.
The old blue zone.
The old Gabe.
Shout out to Gabe.
The old Gabe special. Don't you dare go above that sort of thing. And then at least once a week. Exposing yourself to to that stimulus, developing the aerobic system at the lowest minimal dosage we can, and also getting some contacts in, some foot contacts on the floor, and actually conditioning the joints and the tissue to that stress. So when you go back to rugby, it's like, or whatever sport it is, you've done some running, you've done some sprinting, you're good to go. So always start these things as early as you can. Even if COVID wasn't a thing, like in terms of contact and wrestling, that's maybe something you'd want to start actually as early as possible. That doesn't mean full bosh. That doesn't mean full bosh. But if you can, when you're allowed to, get a partner and start doing some, moderate intensity wrestling drills, getting used to grappling, getting used to ripping, getting some shoulder contacts in.
Even now that
a low dosage, ready to build up for July or August, where it's like, right, we've got to go full biff here before we get back into, before we get into a game. So start these things as early as you can, even at minimal dosage, I think is the key.
Even now, like I know you're saying COVID makes that kind of stuff quite tough, but if you kind of say, right, how can I wrestle and grapple without the partner? Like forward rolls, bear crawls, learning to absorb force, fall on the floor and roll. Yes, you've got to add in the weight of someone else afterwards, but if you can do carries, if you can use like Zercher loaded stuff, if you've got a barbell, if you've got weights at home, Zercher loaded stuff, carries, bear crawls, falls, rolls, tumbling, all that kind of stuff. It's as close you're going to get to simulating like wrestling and falling without actually having a partner to do it with. And then, like I say, it just prepares the tissue, so you're still working that aspect, so we're just watering it down to the point where you're developing those qualities now without actually having to play rugby. And again, I think that in essence is, we're getting into nuts and bolts of what is good strength and conditioning, what is good rehab and injury management. It's working out, okay, what are the physical qualities required to perform well and tolerate this sport, and how can I kind of water them down and start to train them now? It's understanding what the kind of the constituent parts of the sport are, and knowing how to kind of build those up over time. But again, that is literally the process of good strength and conditioning, isn't it? That's just that is what S&C is in a nutshell. People often think, strength and conditioning is a type of exercise class, or strength and conditioning is anything that involves CrossFit or Olympic weightlifting. Well, no, it's okay. What is the sport? What are the demands? Where am I most likely to get hurt? And how can I start to build the body up to tolerate these? And again, like you said, start off at the appropriate level for this athlete, work out where they are now, what their endpoint is, and work out how I get them from A to B as quickly and efficiently and effectively as possible.
Yeah.
That is strength and conditioning. That is good injury management, and it is the same thing.
100%. 100%. Could be a potentially a gap in the market there, mate, for some educational courses in the future. Some MSc, S&C educational courses, which we've been asked for before, but like rather than, right, we're going to spend 2 days on learning how to Olympic lift. It's like, well, cool. Like, that's great. But like you say, that,
needs analysis.
Yeah, exactly. What you've described there is S&C, isn't it? Is identifying the individual, identifying the desired outcomes, and being able to kind of individualize everything, really, isn't it? And like, working from there, exactly what you've just said, really, rather than like an exercise or a particular session or something like that. One session for somebody is not necessarily going to be good for for somebody else. Olympic lift variation is good for someone, but not good for someone else. So
the context, isn't it? It's context. Where does that fit? Where does that fit in that journey of taking this person to the point where they can play rugby effectively at the level they want to, where
context,
they can
mate.
play netball? Yeah, exactly. It's context like that. Right, just looking at a gym program and so great. That could be a great program for someone, an absolute, tosh for someone else.
Yeah, you could say the devil's in the details.
Well, the devil's in the details, right? There's some sound bites coming out of this today. Fantastic.
Awesome. Fantastic, mate. I think that's you. I'm just pausing there because you just give me an idea of. Like I say, educational courses is just so like, right, this is how you do a leg extension, a leg press, this is how you do an Olympic lift, and it's like, it's not S&C, is it? But fantastic, mate. I think we can wrap it up there, mate. It's been a hell of a chat. I've really enjoyed that, and hopefully our listeners have enjoyed that too, and taken something away from it. So I guess in conclusion, mate, we're looking at identifying your entry point, looking at where you want to be long term, and then just working at the minimal dosage possible to gradually get there. Park the ego aside and enjoy those beginner gains again.
Slow and steady. Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Christ, I'm going to stop this there. We've had enough.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
The man needs a coffee. Awesome, mate. Awesome. Fantastic. Anything to conclude with there, mate, or we can wrap it up? I think his internet's gone.
I'm still here.
You're here. Oh. Anything to sort of add there or conclude, mate? Or
roll on 12th of April.
Roll on 12th of April. We'll be ready.
On 12th of April.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Max.
Nice, mate. Always a pleasure.
And hope you've all enjoyed that podcast, guys. I think that's a real must listen to. If you're listening to this and you're part of a sports team, get your coaches to have a listen to this one. Definitely. If you've got any friends that they're buzzing to get back in the gym, that's wonderful. That's a brilliant thing that they're excited. We're excited too. But just maybe get them to listen to this to just minimize that injury risk and just be a little bit careful when you go back. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys, and we'll catch you soon. Cheers.